I do not want America involved whatsoever in anything that is happening in Israel. I don't want my dollars sent over to Israel. We should not be supporting Israel. Nobody wants to talk about the Bolsheviks. Nobody wants to talk about the Christian Holocaust. That's a huge mea culpa. People died from the vaccines. I think Brigitte Macron is a trans woman, actually fathered her children.
She fathered her children. Even as you say that, you know it's complete nonsense.
We know that Emmanuel Macron is also a gay man.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we're going to watch Candace Owens repeatedly spank Piers Morgan on multiple topics. And Piers Morgan just refers back to his old ways of interrupting every 2 seconds. This one does cover some juicy topics, guys, so I'm going to give my thoughts as we go. And with that, let's get into it.
A lot of attention has been focused on you constantly referencing Christ is King. Many people believing that although those words in themselves, if you're a Christian, as you are, would not be offensive, that to Jewish people, when they're being whipped up on social media, as they were at the time, by people who are genuine white supremacists and pretty brazen anti-Semites, that being smart as you are, you would have known that to deliberately use that phrase repeatedly in that time, in that climate, was a deliberate act of provocation to people like Ben Shapiro, who obviously are extremely high-profile Jewish people. Do you accept that?
I'm sorry, which time frame are you talking about when you say at that time?
Well, since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah, no. So that phrase, if you're talking about when it began to be a scandal, because I think everyone was quite confused when there was suddenly this narrative that it could be construed as anti-Semitic, which is why it required so much explaining by people of when it became anti-Semitic. I posted a standalone Bible verse, this is just a pure fact, calling for peace. And at the end of the verse, I ended it and said, Christ is King, last November. Andrew Klavan references that. The reason why this even became a scandal is because of Andrew Klavan. Andrew Klavan did an episode called Because Christ is Really King. And then he accused me wrongly of spitting that phrase at a Jew. That simply never happened, as I showed in my first episode back. It was just made that up out of thin air. I posted a standalone Bible verse and I wrote at the end of it, Christ is King. And then a Jew responded to me telling me to quit my job. So what happens sometimes is then time passes and people try to rewrite history, but we're not going to do revisionist history here. I tweeted Christ is King appropriately following a Bible verse when I was 38 weeks pregnant. And I stand by that proverb and I stand by my declaring Christ to be King, as I have done many times in the past, because it's basic Christian doctrine.
Two things about that. Why would you tweet that particular passage from the Bible, ending Christ is King, on 14th of November 2023? What was your motivation?
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So if people remember what was happening at that time, Ben Shapiro was caught on a tape calling me faux sophisticated and some other stuff, you know, a disgrace, I think was the term. And again, I was 38 weeks pregnant, about to give birth. And my husband just told me, every media person in the world is contacting you globally, asking you to give a comment, to say something. It's obviously a very traumatizing thing to go through in the moment when you're that pregnant and suddenly you're like, I just don't want to deal with this drama. I don't mean like trauma in the very leftist, I feel traumatized by this, but just it's a lot happening leading up to birth. And my husband told me to read the Bible. He said, just read the Bible. You don't have to answer these media members. You don't have to give a comment. You don't have to say anything. These things are all fickle. It doesn't matter.
But just to be clear on the chronology, because the video of Ben saying what he said, we said, I think her behaviour during this has been disgraceful, without a doubt. I think her faux sophistication.
That came first.
Yeah, that came out on 15th of November 2023, but you had posted what you posted on the 14th of November.
That's not correct. You have your timeline wrong. It was the video came first.
So you were responding directly to the video?
No, I'm trying to finish the story, but you just have just so you know, chronologically, you have it wrong. His insult came first. I think it was on the 12th, the insult came.
Were you made aware of the insult? Because and then did it become public? I found out on
Twitter with everybody else. It was just trending, you know? And so just to go back into it, My husband told me to read the Bible and to realize that these things are fickle and that all of these journalists that were asking me to respond to them are doing it because all they want is clicks and money, and they want you, they want to use you for a moment that's not going to matter in the scheme of things in your life. And so I wanted to respond to all of these media members by saying that I'm calling for peace. Christ is king of my heart. I don't need this right now.
So I find it actually comical that this is what Candace Owens gets so ruthlessly attacked for. Ben Shapiro was attacking her character, calling her a faux sophisticate, amongst other things. Rabbi Shmuley was coming after her for years. There was articles coming out left, right, and center trying to defame her. And amongst all the chaos, what does she do? She comes out and she drops a Bible verse saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers," followed by the true statement that Christ is king. And then she's relentlessly attacked for this. And this just goes to show that people are genuinely terrified of those who embrace Christ as king and who unashamedly preach that and who are not worried about who is offended or who is uncomfortable by it. And I honestly believe this is all a part of the attack on Christianity that Candace talks about. No society that truly embraces Christianity would for 1 second put up with the degeneracy that we are seeing, with the gender madness.
I identify as a cis girl and bisexual.
How about you? Bisexual trans woman.
With the sexualization of children and the sexualization of everything, really, from music to Hollywood, and then all the way down to the schools.
To kids, I think, drag queens are princesses come to life or superheroes.
That society also wouldn't tolerate the influx of migrants from foreign cultures that come here and don't share our values and the subsequent deracination of our culture. The one thing that the Satanists and the liberal globalists are truly terrified of is a renaissance in Christ consciousness in the West. And this is why they attack and demonize Christianity and try and make people ashamed of their faith. And for this reason, people need to lean into it even more, because if there is a revival in the West, it will come from Christianity. It won't come from secular humanism. It won't come from scientific rationalism. It won't come from liberalism. It will come from Christianity. And I know that that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but on the individual level, you can live a perfectly fine life with many different worldviews. But on the societal level, there needs to be some sort of a value structure that we all recognize. Otherwise, bad actors and dark forces will just have their way with your culture. But anyways, the tweet that they're talking about there was when Candace tweeted, "Blessed are the peacemakers," from the Beatitudes in the Gospel of Matthew. Well, also in there, it says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And more on the persecution of Christians in the next part. And this is the only part of the entire interview where Piers Morgan is genuinely speechless. It's a breath of fresh air.
Well, if you care this much about innocent people being killed, why didn't you say anything when 1,200 people were massacred to death in the most brutal, barbaric manner in this awful terror attack by Hamas, and nearly 7,000 more were wounded, some of them catastrophically and irreparably? Why did that not compel you to say anything?
Well, first and foremost, Israel's a foreign country, so typically I talk about topics that have to do with America. Secondly, you're only quoting my Twitter feed. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I also had a daily podcast in which I did respond directly about what happened and called the events horrific. Multiple times, said what Hamas did was absolutely horrific. So you're using a snapshot of my Twitter feed where you're acknowledging that I didn't tweet for days to suggest that I didn't have anything to say about what had happened. Now, to be clear, I am consistent on all matters. I do not want America involved whatsoever in anything that is happening in Israel. I don't want my dollars sent over to Israel. We should not be supporting Israel. Obviously, Thomas Massey has done a lot of work showing how it doesn't even make economic sense that we have so much debt and yet we're sending money over to support Israel. And the biggest issue, by the way, that I have with Israel in talking about them being above reproach is the fact that they are supplying the arms to murder Christians, okay? In Armenia, the oldest Christian country in the world, and yet nobody talks about that. For whatever reason, it seems to be the circumstance that when Jewish people die in Israel, it's wall-to-wall coverage. But when Christians die all over the world, nobody talks about it. Everyone wants to correlate everything to World War II. Everyone wants to talk about Adolf Hitler, and rightfully so, he was a horrific person. But nobody wants to talk about Henryk Yagoda, right? Nobody wants to talk about the Bolsheviks. Nobody wants to talk about the Christian Holocaust. I am tired of the media, exhausted of the media not speaking about what is happening to Christians all around the world. And it is especially horrific while at the exact same time that it is happening, the slaughter of Christians in Armenia, the arms being supplied by Israel, that the media turns the other way and says, oh, okay, but what about what about what's happening in Israel? So you know what I'm asking for? Actual equality. Okay, because it seems like this is like a special category, the special relationship that we have. I'm a Christian first, okay? And so my concerns are going to be with what's happening to Christians all around the world, because it is us. We are the #1 most persecuted religion in the world. And all Christians watching this need to realize the time is now to start speaking up, because we have been silenced about the things that are happening to us for a very long time. And the media is very clearly not our friend. When there is wall-to-wall coverage of Christians being killed in Armenia, Christians being killed in Nigeria, and the treatment of Christians in America and all across the globe today, then you ask me if I will use my platform and I will use my voice to speak about what's happening in Israel. How about that?
So, I mean, if Piers Morgan doesn't have a response, then neither do I. Candace Owens is just right about this. Christians are the most persecuted people in the entire world. It's literally happening everywhere. She even mentioned Africa. It's happening all around Africa and Egypt as well, all throughout the Middle East. And just on a cultural level, it's very, very prominent in the West. If you go and tell the regular person in somewhere like Australia, where I'm from, that you are a follower of Jesus Christ, they'll look at you like you're crazy. And it didn't used to be like this. But anyways, on to the next part where they talk about the COVID vax. And this bit will probably get this video demonetized, as happens so often. It'll be the second time this week that that's happened. So if you guys do watch the channel regularly and if you get value out of what I do here, it does help me enormously if you subscribe to my locals page. It's only about $5 a month or whatever you'd like to donate. Of course, only do it if you can spare the money. If you've got more important things to spend your money on, no worries. But the link for that will be down below. At the very least, if you guys could like the video, subscribe to the channel, that would be great. On to the next bit.
The same
When you
question
say
3
if
times.
you are an honest person, you did not think this tweet was anti-Semitic, you're saying that I'm dishonest because I believe what he said was anti-Semitic. And I think that's ridiculous.
No, I am saying that, well, first off, just to start back at the beginning of this interview, I think you're dishonest for a lot of other reasons. So please don't, harp on this one tweet. But yeah, because you flip-flop on your positions the entire time. That's
Like
the reason
what?
why I tweeted
Like
those things
what?
about you. But I mean,
what?
everything. COVID, you flip-flopped on COVID. You flip-flopped
didn't.
on BLM. At one minute, you were supporting BLM, and then you're like, my son's out protesting. It's amazing. And then when they're burning stuff down, I don't find you to be someone that actually takes meaningful risks and says what you believe. You kind of take both positions all the time.
Well,
And so
actually,
I
I'm
think
not
you're like
an ideologue about any of it.
So don't
Unlike
pretend that the
Candace,
first time I ever
with
suggested
respect,
you were
I'm not an
dishonest with the
ideologue about
Kanye
any of
tweet.
these things, right? So you want me
Okay.
to be an ideologue? You want me to stick to one side on everything?
No,
I
I'm just
don't do
saying that it seems like once the conversation cracks, and this is a lot of people in media, they don't take risks. They deliver the government talking points, and then they move once it kind of becomes okay to question the government. So COVID, this was the prevailing narrative. You were like, get the vaccine, If you don't do the vaccine,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden now we're finding out that, and you would have called someone like me, what, anti-vax, trying to kill someone, all of these things. Well, I didn't get the vaccine. My family didn't get the vaccine. And now we're on the other side of this thing, and people are like, well, maybe I had it wrong. Maybe I have some regrets.
What do you think
why
I've
don't you
expressed
stop
regrets over?
going with the mainstream
hang on,
narrative in the
hang on.
beginning?
Don't just keep talking. What do you think I've expressed regret about with COVID?
Well, let me ask you, are you still standing by all the stuff you said about people being idiots for not getting the vaccine?
Yeah, the only thing I changed, because the scientific advice changed, and I've accepted that if there was another health pandemic, I would not rush to accept scientific advice in real time as actually 100% irrefutable, never to change, because science evolves, and especially in a health emergency. The one thing I have said I changed my mind over, because the science advice changed, was that originally they advised that if you had the vaccine, then you could not transmit the virus. And I was then very censorious towards people who simply refused to have the vaccine, because I said, it's not about you, it's actually about your ability to transmit it and maybe infect more vulnerable people. And I thought it was selfish.
Well, that's a pretty big change.
Well,
Piers,
hang
just so
on,
we're
hang
clear.
on, let me finish. And I was very censorious, way too censorious. I've admitted that. Shouldn't have been so censorious. And when the science advice changed and said, actually, there's now evidence that suggests, and in fact, it looks clear, the evidence, that if you have the vaccine, it makes little difference to your ability to transmit the virus or not, then I changed my position. And when I was asked about that later, I said, absolutely. I should not have been so censorious to people who didn't have it, because at that point, it becomes personal choice. But if you ask me on the wider picture, do I think the COVID vaccines were a good thing? Absolutely. Do I think they saved millions of lives? Absolutely. Do I think the deliberate attempt to discredit all science involved in the COVID pandemic is a dangerous, dangerous thing for society? Absolutely. Do I know lots of people who died from COVID who would potentially have been saved by a vaccine if it had been there when they caught the virus? Absolutely. So do not take my one clarification about the ability of a vaccine to prevent transmission as being some great mea culpa that I think...
That's a huge mea culpa, Piers.
Well,
that's a huge mea culpa. That's a huge mea culpa, because that means that you let people to go out and to get an experimental vaccine in their arm and encourage them not to listen to independent voices that were saying, hold on. That's a huge mea culpa. People died from the vaccine. So you're talking about people that died from not getting it. There have been scores of people who died from the vaccine. There have been scores of people like my grandfather who got the vaccine and then were dead within 1 year because it led to their dementia suddenly spreading or advancing rather in a way. Stop. I let you speak about your mea culpa. You do not know
that was down to the vaccine, do you?
Okay. First and foremost, they have admitted so much. They lied about the 6 feet social distancing. That just came out 2 weeks ago. And you were on the side of all of these people. So don't pretend that that's a small mea culpa. People died from blood clots pertaining to the vaccines that you were telling them to rush out and get, okay?
People died
had they have waited and perhaps listened to independent voices who understood that there was some government... No, I let you talk. I let you talk about your mea culpa. Had they have paused and listened to independent voices who have, I think, probably a greater strength when it comes up to standing up to government initiatives, because we recognize that the government is not our friend, and we recognize that the government is not trying to save our lives. Maybe those people would be alive. Maybe my friends who had miscarriages and my friends who were saying that it was impacting their menstruation until the government was ready to admit that 7 months later. If you had listened to people that were telling you their own experiences, someone I know that went completely blind in one eye because of some weird ocular clots. So don't pretend that's a small thing. I just want to say, I'm happy to accept that you've changed your mind.
Let me respond.
But don't pretend it's a small thing. People died from the vaccine.
Let me respond.
And by the way, I want to be clear for people watching this. He's saying still get it. I'm saying still don't. Just so you can hear a different opinion. Do not allow the government to put that in your arm. God's system works. The government is not fixing you in any regard.
I know it seems like I agree with Candace Owens on a lot, guys, but the fact of the matter is that I just do. I like to only call it how I see it. One of the only things that I could really disagree with her about over the past year or so would be her coverage of the Stephen Crowder divorce. I wasn't thrilled about everybody going in on this man's personal life, but for the most part, I just agree with Candace about a lot. And no topics more so than her opinion on Piers Morgan. The guy is a massive fence sitter, and you guys know how I feel about fence sitters.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
But even worse yet, like Candace says, he goes with what's popular. He waits for the cultural tide to turn, and then he will jump on the bandwagon. That is his tactic with every issue. The guy just wakes up in the morning, licks his finger, sees which way the wind is blowing, and goes in that direction, because that's best for his career. And, of course, he was an absolute monster during COVID. So for the guy to be sitting there and acting like it's all gravy, it's not all gravy. And that time was the litmus test for journalists. Who is really willing to challenge the narratives and put it all on the line?
It is the unvaccinated who are the problem, period, end of story.
The only people that you can blame, this isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed, are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us who have done the right thing by getting vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
And in that time, Piers Morgan got a big fat F. But his excuse is always, oh, I'm not an ideologue. Well, guess what? You don't have to be an ideologue to state the truth. If you're an ideologue for the truth, then that's a good thing. If we're having a debate about whether or not you should be forced to take an experimental jab, then the truth is no, you shouldn't. And that is overwhelmingly obvious now. So you can play your little enlightened centrist, I'm not an ideologue game all you like. But sometimes the fact of the matter is that the center is to the left of the truth. And we are seeing that more and more as our society continues to move towards total lunacy. And last thing I'll say on this, I spent a lot of time in America and other countries as well. And in the United States, Big Pharma is completely out of control. You can't watch TV for more than 5 minutes without getting some bombardment of advertisements about drugs.
In most of the world, this is a strange sight. It's a TV commercial for a prescription drug. These ads are legal in most countries, but in the US, they're everywhere. On average, 80 of them air every hour on American television.
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor.
My doctor told me.
Ask your doctor.
Or you can't just drive down the street without seeing billboards about some random useless drug. And it's honestly jarring to see the pharma industry has America by the balls. All the while the country gets more unhealthy, obese, depressed, medicated, without any regard for natural, healthy remedies. Just to name a few: sunlight, unprocessed food, which is hard to come by in America, and regular exercise. I mean, RFK's right about this. And now onto the debate about Emmanuel Macron's husband.
Yeah, I would love to have you on.
I want to ask you specifically about something you've been promoting that I think is an outrageous conspiracy theory, very offensive, very wrong, and I think you've done it just for clout and clicks. Now, you can respond, but it's this question about the French First Lady, Brigitte Macron, who you keep saying is a man. You produced zero evidence that she is a man. It's been deeply offensive to her husband, President Macron, to all of her family. You keep promoting it to millions of people that follow you. And I simply ask why. She's not a man, she's a woman.
I'm happy to answer the question. I think Brigitte Macron is a trans woman. And I think the fact that when Brigitte Macron... Okay.
Where's your evidence that she is?
Well, Piers, the thing is I'm not allowed to speak after you ask me a question, so I don't really know what the purpose of this is anymore. You just seem to kind of be saying your own thoughts. So I'm just going to be silent here and allow you to monologue.
Where is your evidence that Brigitte Macron is transgender?
Well, I did an entire series talking about where this came from. And first and foremost, you're pretending that I'm the one that promulgated this. In fact, it was 3 journalists in France that worked on the story for 3 years. Right. And they teamed up with genealogists and they came across, and it was absolutely fascinating. I read the entire report, and everybody watching this, rather than listen to Piers Morgan giving you a bunch of adjectives, ridiculous, it's awful, I can't believe that she's saying this. Why don't you go pursue a primary source? Why don't you go find the articles that were written by the French journalists? Because this did not come from me. This came from French journalists. And while they were working, let me finish a statement, Piers. While they were working on this piece, the Macrons sent their secret service to interrupt this. This is not a normal thing that you do when somebody's about to publish a lie. You would just say it's ridiculous, publish it, and we'll dispute it. They sent the secret service to intimidate these journalists. They took their phones, they held them, they wanted to know everyone who was working on the piece, and what they uncovered was absolutely fascinating. What they uncovered was the fact that Brigitte Macron, who alleges that the person that they are saying is her is actually her brother, who's never been seen and who they never produced, that Brigitte Macron lived as a man for 30 years and then transitioned at the age of 30. So he's trying to tell you this is crazy, this is wacky. Why don't you just go pursue a primary source?
Well,
I'm not the primary source. It would be very easy to dispute this. All Brigitte Macron would have to do is produce a single photo of her in the first 30 years of her life, or to go on a little walk with her brother, who she alleges that she is not. She refuses to do either. She's suing people, and the one photo that they keep producing is a photo of her daughter to phone that has been photoshopped. Let me get a word in, please.
Brigitte Macron, as you know, has a libel trial against Natasha Ray, who made the claims that the French First Lady was born a man called Jean-Michel Trogner. It's due to take place imminently, and we will get to the bottom of this. And I'll bet you, why don't we have like £100,000 bet that it establishes beyond any doubt to a charity of your choice and mine, $100,000, make it dollars, right now, that it is established beyond any doubt that she was born a woman. Do you accept that bet?
I just want to be very clear. If you are asking me after we have just seen these Trump trials that you and I are going to place... Whoa, no. Stop cutting me off after you ask me a question. It's really just...
the bet. The question was, do you accept the bet?
I am answering your question, but I am allowed to answer your question, Piers. After we have just seen these trials with Trump, if you're asking me to wage a bet on the basis of what happens in a trial and in a courtroom, the state versus some journalists, you are out of your mind if you think that would be the wager. So I'll do it to you this way. Piers, you've got a team of journalists. Can you just simply find, she claims that the person that they found is actually her brother. Do you mind just finding me some photos of Brigitte Macron growing up for the first 30 years of her life? Could you find, and we can make it shorter, I'll give you the $100,000. Could you just find her brother, who she claims all the photos that they found of Jean-Michel Tragno, her brother? She says, that's actually my brother. Okay, great. Could you just find a photo and make it easier? We don't have to wait for a trial to finish. Just find a photo and produce it. You and I can do it live on Twitter. You're going to say, this is the photo that I have found of Brigitte Macron.
Let me
and
respond.
I'll say, oh, you $100,000.
So even though in February 2023, a French court convicted 2 women of libel for spreading the transphobic rumours because it was untrue, even though she's suing again against the people who originally made these claims, even if all this comes back and says it's complete lies, you just say, well, it's the legal system. So there's actually no way of ever disproving.
I don't need a legal. I'm saying we don't need a legal
system.
There's no way
of disproving your lie, is there?
Piers. We just need a photo. I just told you how to disprove it. Just a photo.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine if they produce one, what you would say. Well, it's a fake. It's a fake.
No.
It's what conspiracy theories do, Candace.
Okay, so Piers,
I don't believe for a moment.
Do you realize how extraordinary?
I don't believe for a moment you think Brigitte Macron is a man.
That a first lady of the French state is incapable of simply producing photos of her for the first 30 years of her life, where she allegedly had 3 kids. That's the conspiracy.
So you're saying all her children.
It's so easy. It's such a dumb thing. It's so easy to debunk.
Who had her children?
Piers.
If she was born a man, who had her kids? Who gave birth to them?
Their research from the genealogists and the journalists that worked on this for 3 years is that she actually fathered her children.
She fathered her children. Even as you say that, you know it's complete nonsense.
No, I actually think it's a complete nonsense to not just present something as simple as a photo of yourself for the first 30 years of your life. So no matter how many times, no matter how many adjectives you use here, it's a very easy thing. Like if I have 3 kids. If you said to me, Candace, I believe you didn't live for the first 30 years, I would just give you 80,000 pictures of me and call you completely insane. I wouldn't sue you because it's ridiculous.
Why should Brigitte Macron have to do anything?
Because it takes less time to show some photos of yourself than it does to sue journalists in courts and to have the Secret Service go after them. When they're working. She's not acting like she has nothing to hide.
Yeah, but see, Candace, here's the problem. You see, I think
also we know that Emmanuel Macron is also a gay man, according to the person who came out right when he was elected and said that he was sleeping with Macron in all those articles, which lends more plausibility. And beyond the fact whether you think she's a man or not, do you not think the story is weird? Of the age difference, like hitting on a 14-year-old little boy that you go to school. So there's perversion there. It's sick. The French people have been outraged by this.
I do think that's weird. Yes, I do.
Yes, so there's some weird perversion going on in that relationship. We know Emmanuel Macron had affairs with men. We know that we can't trace Brigitte Macron for the first 30 years of her life.
Yeah.
It seems pretty simple to just come out and say, like, there's something weird happening in that relationship.
Candace, here's the problem. You see, I do think you're a smart person. I do think you're a compelling talker. I understand why you have a big following. And you make a lot of interesting points about all sorts of issues, right? I do genuinely believe that. But when you set your stall, you actually said here, I would stake my entire professional reputation on the fact that Brigitte Macron is in fact a man. You tweeted that in March. That's the problem. In that second, with that statement, your entire professional reputation goes up in smoke because it's a complete load of bullshit. You have not disproven anything. You have an entire. You're just using adjectives here. All right, Joe Biden's a woman. Show me the proof he's not.
We are living in.
Show me the proof Joe Biden's not a woman.
Excuse me.
Show me the proof Donald Trump isn't transgender.
There's tons of photos of Joe Biden growing up.
I think Donald Trump was born a woman. Show me the proof.
Okay, there are tons of photos of Trump 20 years ago on Oprah. What are you saying? That's why I'm saying it's this easy.
I'm saying you don't believe this. You've just done it. You've just done it to run riot with a conspiracy theory.
Okay, you can keep saying conspiracy theory. Just know that we're living in this mainstream media world. So it's not going to discount my people are not going to stop listening to me. In fact, what's going to happen on the basis of this interview is more people are going to go pursue the primary source and read the report of these 3 journalists that have been harassed by the state of France.
I hope they do.
Stop cutting me off. Exactly, because they cannot trust people like you to just keep calling everything conspiracy theories. It doesn't. It's not going to impact my platform whatsoever. In fact, while you were peddling conspiracy theories, whether that be BLM or COVID, I was the person that was telling them the opposite, and those things turned out to be true. So what's actually happened is that I have built up a repertoire, someone that they can trust, because they know that I don't just say what the state wants me to say, and that I'm willing to question things. What I have said on my platform multiple times is I'm willing to say that this report has been disputed. It just simply hasn't been yet. All they keep doing is showing a picture of Tafan, Brigitte's daughter, and recolorized in black and white, and going, oh no, this is her as a kid.
And as a mother
it's 30
yourself,
years of living. Just show a photo of yourself. We don't need to be debating it. Just show a photo of yourself.
And as a mother yourself, you have no qualms about the hurt that you're causing her kids with this kind of claptrap.
I mean, please stop with the sensitivity. You've decided that you want to lead a country, okay? Honesty is demanded. More journalists should be prodding into the story internationally to see what's actually going on here, because at best, you have a perverted story that, in my view, leads way too closely into pedophilia. Just the story of how they got together is weird. You have a allegedly gay man, the person who's had gay affairs with him has spoken out, talked about the drugs that he has done with Macron, and you have these 2 people who are utterly demented leading the state of France. So I'm not going to sit here and go into, but you're a mommy, don't you care, Candace, about how she's feeling? No, it's perverted. At best, Brigitte Macron is a pervert.
So you guys know that I love to break down debate techniques and tactics on this channel, and this is a good one. You should get your notepad out for this. Piers Morgan here is demonstrating the art of how to come to a debate without any research or facts of your own. And when somebody says something that you disagree with, despite your lack of knowledge, just repeatedly call them kooky and call it nonsense and rubbish and interrupt them every 4 seconds. It's a very, very effective technique that will allow you to avoid ever having to actually engage in a debate or conflict. And now when it comes to Brigitte Macron, I don't really know too much about this. I haven't done enough research in the case to have a definitive position, but what I will say is this. Bro looks like a quintessential transformer, a man in a wig, an alien of some sort, I have no idea. But would it come as any surprise to me? Absolutely zero, because that's just the state of things. It would not surprise me if every single one of these liberal world leaders was a homosexual. So with that, guys, you can find that locals link that I mentioned there if you do want to support the channel and get some exclusive content along the way. You can find that below. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, right here. And if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.